Okay, good evening and welcome to the December 11th, 2025 regular meeting of the San Diego Community Power Board of Directors. I'm Tara Lawson-Remer, Chair of the Board representing the County of San Diego. We welcome members of the public, community power staff, and board members joining us today at the Port of San Diego Administration Building. I now call the meeting to order. Mari, please call the roll.
Director Elo Rivera. Director Fisher.
Present.
Director Insunza.
I'm here.
Director San Antonio.
Present.
Director Suzuki. Vice Chair Yamani. Here. Chair Lawson-Remer.
Here.
We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Everyone please stand and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the land of the original inhabitants of the Greater San Diego region. A land acknowledgement is a critical step toward working with Native communities to create meaningful partnerships and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that were the traditional lands of the Kumeyaay. Thank you. I would like to welcome Megan Phelps, Program Associate, to introduce herself.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Directors. My name is Megan Phelps. I'm the new Program Associate with San Diego Community Power, and I'm honored to be working on the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. I'll also be working on some Smart Home Flex programs. In my background, I most recently worked at the Solana Center for Environmental Innovation, where I served as an implementer of SB 1383, the Statewide Food Waste Reduction Act. So as an implementer of a climate program, now transitioning onto the programmatic side, I'm really thrilled to be having this greater regional impact. And I also worked with San Diego 350 running their Youth for Climate program before the Solana Center. So climate equity and justice is a huge passion of mine, and it's an honor to be joining San Diego Community Power in this role. So thank you so much, and looking forward to meeting all of you later.
Okay, thank you. We will now take non-agenda public comments. Written public comments submitted before the board meeting were emailed to board members prior to the meeting and will be posted online. Mari, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Madam Chair, we do not, but in regard to the agenda, the closed session is not moving forward. The General Counsel has advised that it's not needed tonight.
Okay, so no closed sessions? No. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the update. Okay, we now move to the consent calendar, items 1 through 11. Or take a moment to look at the consent agenda. Are there any board members who would like to pull any consent items?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have let's try that again. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any board member comments, questions, or anything anyone like to observe vis-a-vis the consent agenda items? Okay, thank you. Mari, please call the roll.
Director Fisher.
Aye.
Director Insunza.
Yes.
Director San Antonio.
Aye.
Director Suzuki.
Aye.
Vice Chair Yamani.
Aye.
Chair Lawson-Remer.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fabulous. Okay, we now move on to item 12, Community Advisory Committee Quarterly Update. The Community Advisory Committee Chair, David Harris, will present the update. Hi, David. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Board Chair Lawson-Remer and members of the Board of San Diego Community Power. As you know, I represent the city of La Mesa for the past 5.5 years on this CAC and am now chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present this quarterly report. Today, I'll be covering the CAC's work from September through November. One of our main topics in September was the Solar Battery Savings Program relaunch. Our members were really interested in this program. Staff detailed the demographics of contractors enrolled in the program, how the pilot's being evaluated, and how the incentive structure helps alleviate our constraints around resource adequacy. Overall, the committee was super supportive of this program, its innovative design, and expressed a commitment to sharing this information with our communities now that it's fully launched. During October's meeting, the CAC received several updates from the programs team on active pilot projects. These included the DAC SASH program. Don't ask me what that stands for, but the Commercial Application Assistance Pilot and the Efficient Refrigeration Pilot. Regarding the DAC SASH program, the committee focused on outreach, vendor responsibilities, and how third-party systems are monitored. There was also a discussion on the broader strategy behind pilot projects and appreciation for staff efforts in securing additional funding sources to support this work. It's truly the way we're reinvesting in our communities, helping not only our residents, but also businesses. From pilot programs, the conversation moved to regional collaboration efforts, and we heard a report on the San Diego Regional Energy Network, San Diego REN. Members were particularly interested in the REN's governance structure, the County of San Diego's administrative role, and details about the budget request process. This past November, the committee approved a recommendation to revise the Renewable Energy Self-Generation Bill Credit Transfer Tariff as part of our consent agenda. And then we received a really robust informational briefing on several items, including the Clean Tech San Diego, which provided an update on battery energy storage systems, a presentation the board also received. Our members were most interested to take a proactive role in planning for energy storage projects. It's so important to have our communities behind this effort and so necessary for our strategic plan. Our committee members asked which audiences participated in the BESS survey and who would receive the survey summary for educational and outreach purposes. We also heard from the Regulatory and Legislative Affairs team. They provided their quarterly update, during which members recognized and commended staff for their significant but often unseen work required to protect our ratepayers. Members also encouraged the Public Affairs team to explore new storytelling strategies to communicate the regulatory victories and help prevent negative customer impact. So important to let our customers know what we're doing, not only locally, but at the state level to bring down the rates for our customers. So next slide. Our committee ended the month with several forward-looking organizational actions. We established 3 new ad hoc committees. These ad hoc committees are just designed to meet between 2 and 4 times. Each committee has 2 to 4 members. And these 3 committees are essential to move our work plan forward. The first one is the work plan committee. Since we're entering a new year, 2 of our members will be working on creating a new work plan for the upcoming year, in which we expect to have a pretty large turnover in the membership. So we're working on the scope of work, updates to the work plan to determine the tasks that the CAC will undertake, and recommendations for board consideration. Second ad hoc committee is the Community Power Plan Review Committee. 2.5 years ago, the CAC developed the work plan and it was approved by the board. So we're halfway through the plan period. And the Community Plan Power Review Committee will assess the program and project outcomes, measure successes, identify areas for improvement. The committee will use publicly available documents and data to better understand community power's impact and engagement. The ad hoc committee will commit to develop actionable recommendations to support staff in strengthening the effectiveness in advancing the plan's objectives and meeting our goals. And finally, the third ad hoc committee is one looking at distributed energy resources and local infill. This ad hoc committee will review our procurement strategies, financing issues, and economic incentives as community power plans to meet its strategic goal of developing or procuring 300 megawatts of local distributed energy over the next 10 years. Specifically, our committee will focus on the feed-in tariff procurement program and discuss strategies on how small-scale projects may be financially feasible in the current environment. We really want to learn what sort of incentives are necessary to attract the developers, what success can look like when trying to find potential site for these projects. So there's the sites, there's the financing, and there's the developers who want to do this type of work. So these ad hoc committees are really important because they provide opportunities for the members to engage with community power staff in addition to our briefings and monthly meetings. In closing, I wanted to notify you of existing and new vacancies within the CAC. So right now, as of this date, the CAC has 3 vacancies. The city of Encinitas has 1, the city of Imperial Beach, and the city of National City. So, and the last one was a resignation last week by Aida Castañeda. I look forward to working with all of you on identifying new members for this board, or for our committee, I should say. So thank you for your time and for your continued support of the Community Advisor Committee and its work. We look forward to continuing to strengthen community engagement and transparency across the agency. This concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions from any board members? Go ahead.
Really quick. I have no questions, but I just wanted to commend you, David, and thank you for representing La Mesa well.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Any other comments or questions from any of my colleagues?
I do.
Please.
I have a vacancy or we have a vacancy in Encinitas. I'm from Encinitas, so
Yes.
I'd love to like pick your brain because I put it out there at one of our council meetings once. So it'd be great if I could get some bullet points just so I read stuff from the website, but I would rather have it come from you. So like something that would that got you involved,
Yes.
like your words, so that I could be like, okay, because when I read it from the website, it felt really dry. So I think people were just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. But
It can be dry.
Yeah. not, but I'd like it from a person that's actually doing it.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I'd love to touch
I
base
look
with you.
forward to talking,
Okay, great.
communicating with you on this.
Thanks.
David, I'll build on that. I didn't realize we had a vacancy in Encinitas. I'll help on recruitment. I have a really good email list for Encinitas.
perfect.
So we can target Encinitas. I probably have like 40,000 emails or something crazy. So if you help.
No big deal. Only 3/4 of the city.
Help us both out with some language and we'll fill that vacancy.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Make it sound exciting.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Public comment on this item?
None, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any additional comments from my colleagues or do we need oh no, it's a receive and file. So any additional comments before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. We now move to item 13, fiscal year end 24-25 performance review. Dr. Washington, our CFO and treasurer will present this item. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, directors, members of community power staff and the public. I'm Dr. Eric Washington, as stated, Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer at San Diego Community Power. I'm reporting out on this item. The fiscal year end 2024-25 performance review is a receive and file item. This item was presented at both the Finance and Risk Management Committee meeting as well as the Community Advisory Committee. This item really demonstrates staff's strong stewardship by identifying cost-saving opportunities and executing a sound investment strategy. So this performance review takes a look at our audited financial statement results compared to our budget for the fiscal period. And I'm happy to report that we beat our budget, which is really favorable for the agency. Starting from a net position perspective or bottom line perspective, we ended the period with a net position of $108 million, which was well above the $34 million that we had budgeted for. So we beat the budget by roughly almost $67 million. There were some key components that contributed to those savings, as you see in the summary, starting with the net operating revenue, There were contributions from both non-energy cost savings as well as energy cost savings. And then from a non-operating revenue perspective, a contribution from our investments for the period. So I'll unpack those components just a little further for you. Next slide, please. So from a revenue perspective, so these are contributions to our revenue results where we beat our budget by nearly 2%, which is, again, favorable for the agency. Contributing to that were uncollectibles were actually lower than what we had budgeted for. Our lowest, most economically priced product, the participation in that was much lower than we had budgeted for. So that was also a contribution. And then lastly, the demand in the month of June was higher than we had expected. So those three components contributed to the results from a revenue perspective. Next slide. Moving on to the operating expense savings. So there were essentially these three components were key contributors to the operating expense savings. So looking at non-energy costs, where we were able to identify 15.3 million in savings, as you can see from the contribution of the components listed. Net energy cost savings of roughly 15.3 million. So overall, from an operating expense perspective, we saved roughly over 30 million, nearly 31 million in savings between non-energy expenses and energy cost savings for the fiscal period relative to the budget. And then lastly, the performance from our investment portfolio, we were able to generate 13 million that contributed to the bottom line results. So again, the organization continues to practice fiscal strategies to promote long-term financial stability as well as sustainability for the agency. Despite the favorable results that I've just presented, taking a look back at our fiscal year-end results compared to our budget, Community Power continues to face some really significant risks that could potentially impact our financial stability, including financial risk, operational risks, as well as regulatory risk. So it's really important for us to have line of sight and maintain a reasonable reserve level so that we can ensure our long-term goal of being a financially stable agency. Next slide. So this slide shows our reserve build over time since we launched serving our program through the fiscal year end. So we were able to build reserves, but as I'd mentioned, there's still some significant risks that we have to face in the future. Next slide. This slide is really a summary of how we invested or executed on that investment strategy over time with the candlestick bars, and then the green line is sort of a net earnings from those investments over time. Next slide. So, Madam Chair, that concludes this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments from the directors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will start with any questions from any board members, and after that, we'll have an opportunity for public comment. And then if there's any final comments from the board. Any questions at this time? Or comments for our presenter? Just very thorough and careful as always. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you so much. Seeing no questions, we will now go to public comment.
There are none, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do my colleagues have any additional comments, or could I take a motion at this time?
Motion.
Okay. Oh, it's a receive and file. Thank you. That's even better. Okay. Moving on. Okay. I think we're now on item 14. And Tim Maglakamot. Sorry, Tim.
You're good.
Thank you. Can you tell me again how to say your name properly?
Maglamont.
Maglamont. Okay. Tim Maglamont, who is our Director of Finance, and Jeb Spengler, our Senior Strategic Finance Manager, are here to present on this item.
Thanks. Good evening, Chair Lawson Reamer, Vice Chair Yamani, Board of Directors. For the record, my name is Timothy Mangelmott, Director of Finance, and I'll be joined today by my colleague, Jeff Spengler, Strategic Finance Manager. We're here with an item today, an action item for the board for an approval for the Fourth Amendment to the reserve policy. I do want to just take a quick moment just to thank staff, in particular our risk team and some of the different folks, since this item did require a lot of work and effort to bring forth to the board today. Just by way of background, with this reserve policy update, we did try to take a really prudent approach to approaching this reserve policy amendment. And we did also really try to look for opportunities just to lower rates for our ratepayers whenever possible. Again, through this board item. We'll be going through three things today. I'll go over some reserve background. I'll do a deep dive on the power charge and deferred adjustment, or PCIA, and rates, which is community power's biggest risk by far, which you'll see in a second. And then my colleague, Jeff Spengler, will go over a deep dive of our reserve policy and a validation of how we got to where we got to. So just by way of even more background, Community Power's current reserve policy has a goal of 180 days cash on hand. The board also did adopt, a couple times actually, two strategic plan goals that also promoted 180 days cash on hand, kind of as Community Power's reserve target. By way of additional background, kind of when Community Power first adopted our reserve policy and our reserve goal of 180 days cash on hand, that reserve goal was really determined by two things when this was developed a few years ago. Kind of the first thing is we did a review of all of the investment grade CCAs that had the highest investment grade credit rating with S&P. And all of those, or the majority of those CCAs, had 180 days cash on hand as a reserve target. In addition to that, Community Power also has a municipal financial advisor who also recommended 180 days cash on hand as a reserve target for Community Power. So when we did our initial reserve policy and our reserve goal, that's kind of the main basis for how we came up with 180 days cash on hand. In your consent, in the consent calendar today through the Treasurer's report, you'll see we're getting really close to hitting that 180 days cash on hand reserve goal. And in fact, we expect to hit that 180 days cash on hand reserve target as early as October, which will go to the board through the January update for the Treasurer's report. So as we get really close to hitting that current 180 days cash on hand goal, the agency really needs to ask itself, is 180 days cash on hand the right target for Community Power? So to try to answer that question, the agency did, a lot of things. Kind of the first thing we did is we bolstered our risk function pretty substantially. Every week we have this risk working group that convenes to review the agency's risks, to look at different mitigants to those risks, and just to kind of just bolster the risk function for the agency to quantify the reserve target. The board has also seen a lot of professional services contracts come through in the last year to year and a half. A lot of those professional services contracts had to do with the risk function. I'll give you an example with the modeling tool that went to the board called Sequant. That Sequant modeling tool really was a really robust tool that the agency brought on to be able to do stochastic modeling, mathematical models, to run different scenarios that the agency didn't have the ability to do before. We also used American Public Power Association best practices and kind of their risk management framework to come up with a risk framework to guide how we would quantify reserves. And then we also onboarded an expert risk consultant who did a lot of risk work similarly in the Bay Area for a lot of other CCAs. So kind of not the punchline yet. So using kind of this bolstered risk function for the agency to try to inform the reserve target, we did a few things. This risk group really did this bottom-up risk analysis, which is a quantification of reserves to figure out what the appropriate target is for Community Power, kind of from a mathematical quantification perspective. After we did that quantification, my colleague Jeff Spengler will go through just kind of a validation that we did, analyzing other peer agencies, looking at credit rating agency criteria to see what best practices are, and then also looking at national medians data to try to validate this reserve target that we came up with. So kind of getting to the punchline here, at least for the reserve quantification part. So using all these different risk tools that the agency brought on, and kind of using the expertise that we built up as an agency, we really did a really close look at the different risks to Community Power. The list that you see in front of you is really the list of just major risks to the agency where we would propose reserves as a main mitigant against these major risks. Just by way of comparison, a lot of the cities and the county of San Diego have not a similar risk profile, but risks nonetheless. So, for example, I think a lot of you heard me use this example before, but if an earthquake hit your city, for example, then it's possible that the streets would get messed up, that street lights would need to be replaced. And so reserves would be an example for cities and counties where a sudden emergency hits and you need just reserves in your bank to try to mitigate against those risks. Community power has a different risk profile, but risk nonetheless. And so our main risk you see up on that board, I'll go through a couple of them. The first one you see on there, we're calling it market price benchmark volatility, or the PCIA and generation snapback. That by far is the agency's biggest risk at $420 million. We'll go into a lot more detail on that risk in a second, so I won't go into that one too much. The second kind of big one that you see on there are energy costs. That encompasses many things, but I'll give you guys a couple of examples of what's included on there. So in any given year, especially as our PPAs come online, and let's say, a lot of our PPAs have solar and storage systems. This is gonna sound like a weird example, but if it's a really cloudy year, right? Or if it's just a low temperature year, then those solar systems won't generate as much solar. So the load that we would be getting from those solar systems wouldn't be as much. That contributes kind of that risk line where essentially the PPAs that we have aren't generating as much energy that we might have thought. That row encompasses many things. That's just one kind of example of what's included in there. I'll go through a couple more. Load is another big factor there, right? So community power does have a really good participation rate at the moment at 95.4%. There are some CCAs that have dipped as low as 86% in terms of that participation rates. That could be due to many things, bad press, et cetera. And so we modeled, what would happen to community power if our participation rates suddenly dip down to the 86% level. And then the last thing I'll mention on this list is cybersecurity. So it's possible that a cybersecurity event could hit, any agency, including community power. We included a reserve mitigation for cybersecurity, but that's not our only risk mitigation for cybersecurity. The agency also does have cybersecurity insurance, but the cybersecurity insurance isn't necessarily enough to cover what might happen in a cybersecurity event. And so we included an additional reserve to mitigate against cybersecurity, in addition to the reserves that we would potentially have through this reserve policy. So all in all, together, these reserves represent, here we go, clicker issues here. These reserves represent 270 days cash on hand, kind of if we were to mitigate all of the risks altogether at once. It's very unlikely that all these risks would occur together all at once. But nonetheless, we're proposing kind of at the high end to the reserve target, somewhere close to that 278 days to mitigate all the risks for the agency. I mentioned that the PCIA and generation rates comprise the biggest risk by far to community power. So kind of the next section of this presentation is going to go through that in a lot of detail here, especially because, again, it's our biggest risk by far. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, clicker issues. Okay. So I kind of mentioned that 270 days cash on hand is going to be kind of the high end of what we're looking for from a reserve target. But we did want to propose and move forward as the actual target for the reserve policy, a 225 days cash on hand target, where we would essentially increase the reserve target from 180 days cash on hand to 225 days cash on hand. This approach really is the balanced approach. We wanted to try to find a median in terms of, not hoarding too much cash, but at the same time having enough reserves to protect the agency, maintain that fiscal stability, and still try to continue to give our customers rate stability in the future. All right. So I mentioned that the PCIA and the rates were the agency's biggest risk by far. So we did want to spend just a big chunk of time just going over kind of why that is. And for the folks who sit on the Finance and Risk Management Committee, you guys have all seen this before, so I appreciate you all bearing with us on this one. So San Diego Gas and Electric, before community power even existed, had contracted for energy just like community power contracts for energy. So almost every month, the board sees a new long-term power purchase agreement, right? San Diego Gas and Electric similarly locked in long-term power purchase agreements before community power ever existed. And so the idea then is, when community power came along, all of those energy contracts that San Diego Gas and Electric locked in, they were left holding the bag for the energy that was already contracted for. And so the idea with PCIA is PCIA really is the mechanism that the California Public Utilities Commission put in place to make the investor-owned utilities whole for all that long-term energy that they contracted for. PCIA is something that not only community power customers pay, but SDG&E customers pay. And again, it's something that's mandated by the CPUC, especially as, it's not fair for any agency who contracted for long-term energy where the customers departed and they still left holding the bag for the energy that they ended up paying for. So just to peel back one more layer of this, PCIA is really made up of two things. There's a forecast component to PCIA, and then there's a true-up component to PCIA. And I'm gonna go into some detail here to try to explain kind of what makes it both. Getting to the easy one here. So a couple items after this, or I think the next item after this, we're going to talk about rate setting for 2026. So if we're looking at rate setting for 2026, we're going to use that as an example for how rates are set through PCIA. So in this made-up example, we're looking only at the renewable component of PCIA. There's three components, but the simplest one is going to be renewables. So in this example, we're assuming that SDG&E is paying $70 per megawatt hour for renewable energy. And again, that's what they contracted for kind of in the long term. Kind of in this year, the CPUC also projects what's called these market price benchmarks for what the CPUC thinks that SDG&E is going to get in the open marketplace for that same energy that they already paid for, right? So in this example, we're saying that SDG&E will get $62 for that energy in the open marketplace. So again, SDG&E bought that energy for $70. The CPUC is saying through these market price benchmarks, they'll make $62 in the open marketplace. So you take that $70, you minus $62, and then the CPUC is saying that SDG&E will lose about $7 per megawatt hour for the energy that they already contracted for through these long-term PPAs or through their own solar storage or whatever energy assets that they own. And so our customers make SDG&E whole for the energy. Again, we're not making as much in the open market by paying SDG&E $77.55 per megawatt hour. Hopefully you guys followed me so far. So that's kind of the easy component of PCIA. That's the forecast, right? So the idea with the forecast is SDG&E gets made whole through PCIA in 2026. I mentioned there's another component for PCIA, which is kind of the chew-up portion. And this is the slightly more complicated version. Okay, so if we're looking again at setting rates for 2026, there's a true-up that occurs for setting rates in 2026. To figure out how that true-up works, you got to go all the way back to 2024. That same mechanism that I mentioned for 2025 going into 2026 also happened in 2024. So again, SDG&E paid $70 per megawatt hour for renewable energy. And again, this is back in 2024. In the open marketplace back in 2024, the CPUC said, okay, SDG&E, we think through a forecast, you're going to get $71 in the open marketplace. So when we set 2025 rates, SDG&E needed to pay $1.24 to our customers because they made $71.24 in the open market, and they only paid $70. So that happened through rates in 2025, where SDG&E made our customers whole for what they made in the open marketplace. But then again, remember, that was a forecast for what the CPUC thought prices would be in 2025. Fast forward to today, the CPUC has now published what the actual market price benchmarks are for 2025. and for what SDG&E actually made in the open marketplace for that same energy, where they had forecasted at $71 price. So in 2025, the CPUC is saying that, it wasn't the forecasted price of $71. Instead, the CPUC said that SDG&E made about $63 in the open marketplace. So SDG&E needs to be made whole for that difference for what they actually made in the marketplace. So you take that $71, you subtract $63, and SDG&E needs to be made whole for that $7 that they didn't make to make them whole for 2025. Okay, hopefully you guys followed me so far. I know this is a super dense topic. So getting to 2026 rates, SDG&E is made whole through 2026 rates through this true-up process, right? So you take that $71, SDG&E only made $60 in the open marketplace in 2025. So there's a true-up that happens for SDG&E where through 2026 rates, there's a true-up where our customers need to make SDG&E whole for $7 in the open for what they didn't make in the open marketplace. Hopefully you guys follow me so far. That's the true-up component for PCIA. So together, there's going to be the forecast component for PCIA. There's a true-up component for PCIA. And then those things together kind of make up, forecast plus true-up equals PCIA. Kind of the main punchline, and one of the main points I wanted to drive home here is, in this example, we're assuming that SDG&E is paying $70 in the open marketplace, right? And for whatever SDG&E makes or doesn't make in the open marketplace, they need to be made whole, right? So if SDG is paying $70 and if energy prices drop, let's say to $10, right? Then you take that $70 and if the prices drop to $10, then SDG&E needs to be made whole $60, which is a lot in the open marketplace, right? And so we don't know what the energy market's going to look like. The energy market's very volatile. I mentioned $10. The energy prices have dropped that low in the past. And that's one of the main reasons here why, you take a $70 starting spot and whatever SDG&E makes based on what the energy market's saying, they need to be made whole, and our customers pay SDG&E through that PCIA to make them whole. Okay. So that's PCIA, the simple version in a nutshell. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense there. So getting into some of that volatility that I mentioned earlier, you can see here kind of a bar chart for SDG&E's rates since 2021. You'll see PCIA there in that yellow bar, and then that blue bar represents what SDCP makes since 2021. As you can see, that the prices for what SDG&E's paid, the PCIA in the actual marketplace has been very volatile. When you look at how we calculate our discount to SDG&E, the way we calculate our discount is you take that SDG&E price, that dollar per megawatt hour price, you subtract out PCIA, and then you subtract out SDCP's generation rate. And that's how we come up with our discount to SDG&E. I mentioned the PCIA because we don't collect PCIA in terms of revenue. That's something that our customers need to pay SDG&E. So if that fluctuates, that either eats into our discount or it could potentially help us, right? But if it fluctuates, it kind of fluctuates how our discount is to SDG&E, because that could either be really big if market prices go really low and SDG&E needs to be paid back a lot, or it could get really small if SDG&E actually makes money in the marketplace, if that makes sense. And then the last thing I'll mention is that blue bar represents what we're actually making in terms of revenue. So what Dr. Washington presented earlier in terms of our revenue, that blue bar represents how much we're actually making dollar per megawatt hour in the marketplace. Okay. I mentioned kind of earlier when I went through that PCIA calculation, it's all based on these CPUC market price benchmarks. And then, just to see it visually here, those market price benchmarks historically have been very volatile. You'll see in 2021, prices were really low. If you just look at today's market price benchmarks, they're fairly high. And I wanted to make the point earlier of whenever prices are low, then the PCIA gets really high because SDG&E needs to be paid back a lot from PCIA, right? If the market price benchmark is very high, then the payback isn't as much. And currently, we're in a high market price benchmark environment at the moment. But we wanted to see, what would happen if those prices dropped back down to 2021 levels where those prices were really low and the PCIA and the payback was really high. So kind of just through this risk team that kind of was created in the agency. One of the things that we have the ability to do now are these stress tests. So we did a stress test to see, okay, what would happen to Community Power's bottom line if those market price benchmarks drop down to those 2021 levels in the next calendar year in the 2026 rate setting cycle. If those market price benchmarks drop down to that really low 2021 level, we would lose about $331 million or about 120 days cash on hand if those market price benchmarks drop down to those 2021 levels. We did a second stress test. So what's happening in the north with the PG&E territories in our sister CCAs to the north is they're seeing this play out right now. They're seeing a really high PCIA. They're seeing those market price benchmarks dip lower. So we wanted to model, what would happen to Community Power if that occurred for our customers. We also threw in there a couple other just scenarios where participation rates drop for Community Power down to the 86% level. And then we threw in another stress test scenario where uncollectibles would increase if, say, a big flood hit San Diego again and people weren't able to pay their bills. In this scenario, you'll see here for Community Power, we would lose $238 million or 99 days cash on hand. I'll throw in a couple other stats here. This is what would happen to Community Power if that PG&E scenario played out. We did a review of other PG&E CCAs kind of to the north. And again, this is playing out right now for them. There is a CCA out there who already published what their rates would be for next calendar year. And that CCA is already dipping into the reserves by 160 days cash to mitigate this big risk. And that CCA is also going to have a 1% premium to PG&E to the north. So it's a major risk to Community Power. It's something, again, that we want to try to mitigate the reserves. And it's something that's playing out in our CCA sisters to the north. So it's kind of, the biggest risk to the agency by far and something that we want to try to mitigate against. In terms of other mitigation strategies for this big PCIA effort that's happening at the moment, we're approaching it in two different ways. I kind of mentioned the first one earlier with trying to make sure we have enough reserves in the bank to mitigate this big risk to the agency. We're also approaching it from a regulatory and legislative perspective. There was a proceeding that occurred through the CPUC that kind of helped with the resource adequacy component of the market price benchmark, where we help advocate for what's now an average of the resource adequacy portion of the market price benchmark, where they're taking an average of 3 years. But there's a second PCIA Track 2 proceeding that hasn't been scoped out yet. But we are exploring other avenues through the reg and leg space to see how we could also help with the PCIA, especially again because it's the biggest risk to the agency. Okay, so all that said, that's kind of how we came up with that big 270 days cash on hand kind of high end portion of the range for the reserves. Again, we're proposing a 225 days cash on hand target. And then we're proposing also a 180 days cash on hand minimum. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeb Spangler, who's going to go over a little bit more details on that reserve proposal. Thanks.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of directors of the board. Jeb Spangler, Senior Strategic Finance Manager. So I won't go into too much additional detail on the reserve policy thresholds that Tim just laid out. So what I will walk through are the various thresholds. Then I'll go into a little bit of detail about some of the modeling that we've done for reserve approaches going forward. And then finally, just the validation of these approaches that Tim mentioned earlier. So as Tim mentioned, the 180-day floor, which has been our current target, we're going to maintain that as our proposed minimum. So what that will do is provide our credit floor. It really is kind of the floor that we look to maintain in order to eventually achieve a public investment grade credit rating. With a new target of 225, that allows us to address kind of cyclical ongoing volatility in such a way that we wouldn't drop below that 180 days minimum should something kind of on a normal basis where we need to use reserves, but we wouldn't have to use so much that we drop below the minimum. And then finally, the maximum of 270 days is being addressed as kind of the doomsday scenario where a lot of things go wrong at the same exact time. And we really need to use reserves in order to stabilize rates for our customers. We want to just present a quick snapshot of energy price volatility and just highlight the fact that these events that we see, and this is natural gas spot prices, which is largely a barometer for energy prices in the market overall. These energy price fluctuations that we see are pretty volatile, but cyclical within about a 2 to 4 year period. So really, some of these events that we're looking to address might be a singular event, but we might see sustained low prices or sustained high prices for a period of 2 to 4 years. So ultimately, we kind of need to build in enough bandwidth in order to be able to kind of withstand kind of these 2 to 4 year periods. So with these new risk modeling, and this will be kind of part of our rate setting process as well, we'll be able to present better kind of forecasted reserves based on various scenarios that we might present. This was a base case scenario that we presented, that we ran as of financial results as of September 30th, which is the latest in the Treasurer's report this month. So under the forecast based on 9/30 numbers, we would see potentially under this kind of base case scenario, we would see financial reserves at the end of fiscal year 26, just above 580 million or approximately 213 days cash on hand. As Tim mentioned, we have information that suggests that we will likely hit the 180 days minimum if we choose to move forward with this policy. We would choose that we'd hit the 180 days potentially by this month. So that would be well on our way to our new target of 225 days cash. Tim presented this scenario earlier. What I did just want to show is there is always a recovery, right? If we have this scenario where this isn't the doomsday scenario, this is just a kind of a one stress scenario where we have a large drop due to the market price benchmark change. We would see the use of reserves of almost 232 million, getting to a low balance of 120 days cash on hand. But then you would see the recovery, which would get us back to the 180 days cash on hand minimum by approximately October of 2027. So we would end up using reserves in 26, part of 27, and then reserves would build back up to our minimum. So we did this very thorough analysis, this bottom-up risk approach analysis. What we wanted to do was make sure that even though these new numbers that we've come up with, we wanted to make sure that they were still in alignment with primarily our CCA peers, but as well as credit rating agency criteria. And then finally, to a lesser extent, just kind of national medians data, APPA, public power best practice and recommendations, and then just a snapshot of like California public utilities, Southern California public utilities in particular. And the first step being a comparison of our CCA neighbors across the state of California. We did a deep dive into every individual policy, if there was one. We tracked it out to whether or not they have a minimum, a maximum, a target. And then I'll get into more detail on the next slide, but we overlaid that with the blue horizontal line that you see on this chart. That is their actual reserve numbers. That's their actual days cash on hand or their unrestricted cash and investments. That number, just interesting enough, is generally higher or at each of the CCA's target or above the target. And ultimately, what I think this approach showed us was that if you kind of look at the blue bar for what would be our minimum and the green bar for our maximum and the orange for the target, we are still well within the lines of being reasonable and kind of within the reasonable range amongst our policy or our CCA neighbors. And in particular, the two that really we've identified as having robust risk management practices, Silicon Valley Clean Energy and AVA, we're kind of benchmarked to them quite nicely. This is a chart that shows on the chart to the right shows our actual days cash on hand as of the end of the fiscal year, so ending June 30, 2026. As you can see, just on a days cash on hand metric basis, we're on the low end across the CCA community. As I just mentioned, that number looks better today than it did at the end of June. And then finally, just up to the left, we throw this days cash on hand number around a lot. It's a number that, we dream about at night here on the staff side. But just want to make sure that the understanding of how this is actually calculated, it really is just unrestricted cash and investments, things that we could use for emergencies, divided by our total operating expense number, and then you multiply that by 365, and that gets you your days cash on hand. So the next step in the validation process was to really go to the 3 national credit rating agencies, all 3 of which rate CCAs. Primarily, I think the most are rated by S&P. Moody's has 2 or 3, and I think Fitch has 2 or 3. We wanted to just validate that these new ranges and targets that we have set still meet kind of the criteria that the credit rating agencies look for. Moody's in particular, they suggest their strongest assessment, which is AAA. They suggest cash of greater than 250 days. And liquidity for their overall rating is 10% of the overall rating that they look like. So it's a very high factor in their credit rating criteria. S&P, which has the most ratings for CCAs, their very strong liquidity assessment assumes a minimum of 150 days cash on hand, where their strongest is greater than 270 days. And finally, Fitch Ratings assumes that anything greater than 90 days is just neutral to the overall rating. But if anything less than 90 is considered weak and assumes additional risk. And then finally, as I mentioned, we took a look at national medians data, both Fitch Ratings, APPA. There's a number of publications that focus on public power and does surveys across the country of public power utilities. And they rank them based on their credit rating, specific credit rating, and take a look at their days cash on hand. So this is broken out by public power utilities, their credit rating, and then the days cash on hand they have. I don't have the exact number of utilities that are included in the survey. Again, this is kind of apples to oranges because public power utilities manage to different risks than CCAs. But we did just want to highlight that it's our ranges are within these bounds, and particularly for investment grade credit rating agencies. Finally, we'll just do a quick update on what the reserve policy language states. Won't spend any time on the minimum, recommended, and maximum. One big change is actually we're changing what is how reserves are defined. It had been defined as net position. I think a more appropriate metric for reserves is this new unrestricted cash equivalents, and investments definition that we've proposed. Net position just includes things that we wouldn't be able to use in case of emergency. And this new policy is actually what credit rating agencies use for their metrics. So we figured that would align nicely. And then finally, there's 3 kind of purpose and intent of these thresholds that we wanted to highlight. For the minimum, we just want to basically say that the board should ensure that we don't drop below the minimum if at all possible, although understanding that reserves can be used for any purpose that the board determines. We just want to have the 180 days as our floor. Any reserves above the maximum isn't actually much different from how it currently states, where the board can just choose to use it for strategic investments, programmatic reserves, or other purposes. And then finally, and this is an important one that I think we're excited about, is giving the board the ability to designate reserves that are between the target and the maximum as rate stabilization fund reserves. That gives the board the opportunity, this would become a pot of money that the board could use kind of on an ongoing basis to stabilize rates through volatile periods. It's got some accounting nuances that will require its own separate policy that we'll be returning to the board in early January with. But it's something that we thought the board would like to see, and we're excited to bring that back in January. And I think with that, Tim and I are open for questions.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, very thoroughly documented. I appreciated all the different sources of comparators because I know it's not always apples to apples. So I thought that was really helpful, kind of different ways of thinking about how risk is assessed and what kinds of risks we might face and how different entities evaluate that risk. So I found that really helpful. Any questions for my colleagues before we go to public comment?
Thanks for the great presentation. Obviously, as somebody who's a new board member, it's very informative. In my briefing, I asked a lot of questions. So just kind of the nuts and bolts about PCIA. So again, I'm a very basic person. So basically, SDG&E made a bad purchase on a wrong forecast. CPUC didn't do their math very good, and so our ratepayers pay extra. Is that what I mean? I'm just wondering if that's. I get maybe a little bit. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that, but based on the graph you showed, I'm like, I don't get how this is like legal that we continue to pay SDG. It seems like no matter what, they're made whole, and very rarely do they have to pay out. Am I correct in this?
Yeah, so through the chair, thanks for the question, Director Fisher. So you're right that in the SDG doesn't need to be made whole, right? I mean, it's when SDG&E purchases that energy and when those customers departed community power, right, then they figure out how much that energy cost for the customers and the energy that departed community power. So I mean, there's no choice but to pay SDG&E, right? Because it's the whole idea is through PCIA is they need to be paid back, right, for the energy that they already contracted for. So I mean, it's I guess getting to your question, yeah, there's no choice but to pay the PCIA. And I guess the other thing to mention too is it cuts both ways, right? Our customers pay PCIA, SDG&E's customers will also pay PCIA.
Well, again, it's just bizarre to me. So they bought it.
Yeah.
It didn't get used. Does energy just disappear?
No.
Just like I said, I'm just trying to understand.
They're like long-term contracts.
Yeah.
That the utility enters into when they think that their load is of a certain size. And then part of that load departs, they came to us, but they have these long-term contracts that they purchase or whatever the market value was at that time. And so they are now selling some of it because they don't need it.
Right.
And we have to make them whole for whatever, or they make us whole for whatever that difference is between what they can sell in the current market versus what they contracted for.
That's right. Like I said, and basically you have an excess that's perhaps part of their fault, some things I didn't see, but I just don't see why we'd have to pay for it to
it's like
be
a
made
stock
whole.
Market almost, like it just fluctuates.
I think that the majority of our rate papers don't care, don't understand about a stock market. And I think that's the frustrating part is that, I don't know what's going into the CPUC and how they make their assessments and stuff like that. And I don't know, I think that there's something, is there any legislative actions that we're taking to figure this out? Because obviously this is still fairly new throughout the state. And, I just can't imagine for the next 10, 15, 20 years that this is going to be how it's going to work. Because I think, we're a free market economy and we understand the regulations under utilities, all of them. But this is just, I think that when we share this with the general public, I think they're looking at the same, regardless of SDG&E, is their ratepayers are paying PCIA. I don't see the equity at all when we're trying to do something that provides for long-term clean energy, which is good for everybody in California.
Yes, if I can respond through the chair, it's a great question, Director Fisher. I think through our Reg and Leg team, through Laura Fernandez, there should be multiple opportunities here to help chime in on PCIA, especially with the PCIA Track 2 proceeding being scoped out right now. I'd imagine, and in fact, I'm pretty certain that our Reg and Leg team is going to return and look to some of our board members and electeds to help advocate for other ideas in regards to PCIA. Because I think you're absolutely right in terms of just the confusion around PCIA and kind of all that. So
yeah, and one thing I will say that all the time I've spent with Sandy Kumar in the past on the finance board and now coming back, I've always thought our reserves, like we just have this big huge pot of money just sitting there for the rainy day. And so with the new language talking about it being used to possibly stabilize rates, I think that's an important part of this policy. And it's something that I feel is going to genuinely help our ratepayers in the long run. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainties out there, but I think having that provision really does help us a lot. So thanks for the great presentation. Lot of information to be had. You both did a great job in explaining it in terms that I could understand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to thank the team for meticulously and diligently, going through that process. I think it is not easy, but you've been so patient in educating, us, the finance and risk management as well. And so I think the policies that will come forward, we will revisit that again, but I think it's really wonderful for our ratepayers to have that, rate stabilization, as well as, that conservative, putting that reserve where it should be. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's go to public comment.
There are none, Madam Chair.
Okay, no public comment. I just want to echo Member Fisher as we kind of look ahead, the importance of affordability and rates has got to be absolutely paramount, and has to be really centered on all of our thinking and all our decision making about the rates we set. What do we do with our reserves? Rate stability. So I think that I just wanted to uplift. I think that's the right focus, and we need to really center that in the work. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion in the second. Please take a vote.
Director Fisher?
Aye.
Director Insunza?
Yes.
Director San Antonio?
Aye.
Director Suzuki?
Aye.
Vice Chair Yamani?
Yes.
Chair Lassen-Remer?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. So we now move on. Thank you both again. Thank you. We now move on to item 15, update on SDG&E's 2026 predicted rates. Erin Liu, Rates and Strategy Manager, will present this item.
Hello, good evening, Board of Directors. Perfect segue. It's almost a trilogy. We have the two previous agenda items, so perfect dovetail into this one. So we'll talk a little bit more about SDG&E's 2026 rate outlook this evening. So I'm going to start with our timeline and talk about policy objectives, do a refresher on rate components, and then get into kind of the meat and potatoes of what SDG&E is projecting for 2026. So in terms of the outline, SDG&E published their latest up-to-date 2026 rate outlook in November. Those are subject to change. We'll see a refresh in December, on December 31st to be exact, where those will be their final 2026 rates. So in terms of our policy objectives, we've already covered a lot of these themes this evening. We are all on the same mind in terms of doing our due diligence in terms of balancing affordability as well as long-term financial prudence, as well as stability and everything else here. So a refresher on community power rate components. We've talked about the generation. There is a generation component on both community power as well as San Diego Gas Electric's bills. So the generation component is really the cost to procure that energy to serve our customers. The delivery component is solely responsible for SDG&E. It's really the charge to the customers for using those distribution transmission assets. The PCIA, the power charge indifference adjustment, a different way or a different perspective of looking at it as defined here is really the above market costs that SDG&E charges the departed load customers that now move to CCA such as community power. And finally, the franchise fee is just a public charge for using the public right-of-way. So the table here is just an illustrative example from our joint rate comparison, showing the different breakdown of the rate components that I just described across the different products compared to SDG&E's default only product. So we always want to illustrate as well as refresh on the idea of equality versus equity here. So equity is really, really important to the organization as well as to the rate development process. And it underlines and defines why we have 3 sets of rates. And it's really mainly due to the PCIA, which we can see more of a mathematical example here. So Community Power had three applicable vintages because we had 4 phases of moving customers into our service. And those 3 vintages, in order to provide the same value proposition or the same discount to all of our customers to avoid winners and losers, as Tim talked about and described before on how we calculate our discount, since the PCIAs are different, we have to create 3 different sets of rates to maintain the same discount and the same value. So all we've been waiting for generation outlook from SDG&E for their bundle generation rates. All of these tables on the next few slides, just gonna walk these through. They're all in the same format. So if the most left column down will be the customer classes from residential down to the bottom row for system total. And then the center of the table, we see the average SDG&E commodity rate, the current effective rate, and the October published rate, as well as the latest November published rate. And then the 2 most right columns are the percent differences between current compared to what SDG&E published October versus current versus what SDG&E published in November. So one item that I do want to point out here is the percent changes. The 2 rightmost columns are very different, right? That's why, again, going back to my point that we have to really wait for the December final rates in order to conclude our analysis in terms of setting and developing Community Power's 2026 rates, because these numbers are always in the air and they have wild swings, and we've seen that before, and we can expect to see that in the future as well. The other item is really kind of the main point takeaway from this slide. So as of right now, SDG&E is projecting that system total rates on the generation side for bundle customers is expected to increase by 12% approximately on the system level. The next slide is the PCIA. We talked about the concepts, we talked about how the mechanisms work. So I want to point out the actual PCIA rates, the current PCIA rates, as well as what is being projected as of the latest in November. Again, the table is in a similar format. So I do want to say that 2025 PCIA rates, as Tim described in his example earlier, they are negative. They are a credit to customers. That's why we had a lot of competitive edge for SDG&E, as well as for all of the CCAs, just more headroom overall since the PCI is a credit. So moving forward, we are already seeing some of that snapback. If you look at 2026, it's a 300% and more increase. So some of that snapback is already expected to occur in 2026 as market prices start to come down and are expected to stay low. And just to complete the whole picture, the holistic view on the delivery side, SDG&E is also projecting a increase in terms of the delivery rates. But it's a little bit uneven across the different customer classes. As you see, residential customers are going to see a higher than system total average increase, while some of the other customer classes are actually going to see decreases. And these delivery rates, again, are not final. There's some still pending regulatory proceedings open at the Public Utilities Commission. We are expecting these delivery rates to probably increase by even more what they're being projected as of today. In addition to these regular actual rate value changes, there are some additional rate design changes as well. So just want to highlight some of those. The general rate case phase 2 for SDG&E wrapped up in 2025. And over here, I think is a great example of one way that we are gaining some ground on the fight against the PCIA. So a huge shout out and a lot of work for the organization as well as the board of directors for all of your support in SDG&E is now required to carve out the PCIA as a separate line item for their bundled customer bills. So that should reduce some confusion and really move towards more customer transparency when a customer and their family and friends are comparing two bills, one Community Power, one SDG&E, the different cost breakdowns. So it's more of an apples to apples to comparison moving forward than what it is now. The other items are being implemented in different phases. So two are being implemented on, one is being implemented on January 1st. So that's the seasonality adjustment. If right now, if you take a close look at your utility bill, summer rates are usually a little bit higher than winter rates. So one revision moving forward is to reduce that volatility between summer and winter generation rates. The other two items here, the time of use alignment is taking the current March and April special breakout of the 10 to 2 p.m. super off peak, moving that and aligning the rest of the 10 months to that to make it a little easier for customers as well to provide price signals on kind of the next topic we're going to talk about on the smart flex programs. And then the last item that's also being implemented on April 1st is a carve out of a new medium commercial class to really better understand the cost of serving that customer class. So that's going to be carved out of the existing medium, large commercial and industrial customer class. So in terms of next steps, we're going to continue, as we always do, monitor information that's filed by SDG&E as well as any regulatory updates from the commission. Again, SDG&E won't publish their final rates until December 31st. So we're closely monitoring that. So more information will be coming before we come back to the board on January 15th to present our proposed rates for 2026. And again, our proposed rates is going to be trifurcated rates, so 3 sets of rates to account for the PCIA and the vintages. And in addition, we will probably be coming back to the board before April 1st, where there's rate design changes that will be implemented by SDG&E as well. So I know that's a lot of information, but that concludes my update for today. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from any of my colleagues?
Thanks for the presentation. So how many times a year does SDG&E change their rates?
Usually more than 2. The most we've seen are 6.
Okay.
Yeah. This year it's been 3, I believe.
And I know you work for this organization, but any idea of how they base their rates, or is it just?
It's a pretty exhaustive process, I would say. So the generation rates goes through the ERA, the PCIA that Tim covered. The non-generation goes through the general rate case, which is established on a 4-year period now. And it's a 2-3 year process at the Public Utilities Commission.
Okay, because I feel like SDG&E is not very truthful in how they do stuff, and that's always been a hard part. And nobody ever got to point it out because there's no other competition really, other than putting solar panels on your house and staying off the grid. And so I just wonder how they do it. And obviously they're for profit, and so a little bit different. So appreciate their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Please.
Thank you. Aaron, how do you feel about the 8% increase
How do I feel about, sorry,
based on your experience and how you see this going? I know we cannot guess, but how do you feel about it?
based on kind of SDG
Yes.
projected rates?
Uh-huh.
All these numbers really inform our decision making. I think it's still too early to tell. We need to gather all the information and really wait until December 31st for the final set. Because again, October and November, the generation rates, they were projecting 20% increase. Now it's 12%. So wait and see.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is received and filed.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have any public comment?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you for keeping us updated. I know it's too early to tell, but it's just helpful to have a sense of where the trends are going. So thank you very much. Okay. Moving on. We now go to item 16, approval of a master service agreement with Ascend Analytics for energy storage optimization services. Janine Camara, Director of Portfolio Management, present this item.
Hello, good evening, Board Chair, Board of Directors. I'm Janine Camara, Director of Portfolio Management, and here with the recommendation that the Board of Directors approve and authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute a master service agreement with Ascend Analytics for energy storage optimization services for an initial 3-year term with 1-year renewals, and authorize the CEO to execute work orders for energy storage resources for a not to exceed amount of 2.5 million over the initial term of the MSA and for a not to exceed amount of 2 million for any renewal term. So just to share some background for each of Community Power's utility scale battery energy storage system projects or BESS projects. Daily energy storage optimization is really needed for effective participation in California's markets. All of Community Power's BESS projects that are planned are either standalone battery resources or we have batteries that are paired with a renewable generation source. And to date, we have received some optimization services under our scheduling coordinator agreement. And reminder that agreement is going to expire on April 1st, 2026. So part of a request for proposal process that I did earlier this year on load forecasting and scheduling, we also evaluated energy storage optimization proposals. Okay. And so why do we need energy storage optimization? Well, the reason is because it adds value to our overall portfolio of resources. And that value is primarily realized through what we often refer to as load shifting, which is charging the batteries in the middle of the day when prices are low and supply is abundant. Well, right now it's typically in the middle of the day. And then discharging that stored energy when prices and demand are high. Right now, that is most often in the evening as the sun is setting and customer demand is still fairly high. Each project captures market revenues through this optimization daily of charging and discharging when prices are in our favor. It's important to note also, all of our projects are unique. They all have an underlying energy storage service agreement or power purchase agreement. And any optimization that we do needs to be able to honor and consider, any limits that have been set forth and approved in the PPA. So whether it's a standalone battery, whether it's a battery that's part of a hybrid project, battery could be co-located with a specified generation source. The optimization needs to understand the differences. Another big one is whether the battery, if it's a hybrid, can it have any grid charging? We have some PPAs that allow no grid charging and some PPAs that might have, 5 to 10% allowed over the year. And so the energy storage optimization needs to understand all that. And it is also one of our tools to make sure that our projects meet resource adequacy requirements in the market every day. The energy storage optimization also includes 24/7 monitoring of each of our batteries' state of charge, 24/7 monitoring of energy prices at the point of interconnection with the battery. And the optimization needs to be able to automatically update our bids if there's, a grid emergency or certain market conditions that it needs to be able to see that and make those updates. The optimization, it also considers the current amount of energy being produced at the renewable source. And it also is aware of any transmission constraints at the point of interconnection. Another reason that battery energy storage is really important to us is batteries right now are one of our primary mechanisms to avoid and mitigate the risk of renewable curtailments. So overall, one of our goals is to not curtail our renewable energy when there's oversupply issues on the grid. And it's the optimization that's going to tell each project when to charge and then when to discharge. And we're going to do it all for the benefit of Community Power's customers. So energy storage optimization adds value to our portfolio of resources, and it also supports our strategic plan goal to prudently manage the power portfolio to minimize costs and to minimize risk. So following a competitive solicitation, like I said, staff is recommending moving forward with approval of a 3-year agreement with Ascend Analytics for their tool Smart Bidder for energy storage optimization services. So the Smart Bidder platform will allow power services staff to manage resource-specific bidding strategies, and it allows us to override any energy bids if and when market or grid conditions call for. The agreement also, I'm on the wrong slide. The agreement also includes additional price forecasts that will integrate with our internal resource planning systems, and it includes integration with our scheduling agent and their scheduling systems. Ascend Analytics is a very experienced partner. They've been operating in California, providing portfolio management and optimization services since 2003. They have a very diverse set of customers. They serve CCAs, IOUs, public utilities, and Smart Bidder specifically launched in 2021 and is currently contracted for bid optimization services for over 5.1 gigawatts of energy storage assets in North America. Mm-hmm. So daily optimization of Community Power's battery energy storage system projects, it is an ongoing operating expense of the power supply portfolio, and the total cost of this function will ultimately be determined by the number of projects that reach commercial operations. So the total cost of optimization services under this agreement will not exceed 2.5 million for the initial 3-year term and will not exceed 2 million for any renewal term. I do want to note that these totals are based on every approved project coming online as planned and using Smart Bidder. However, the contract structure does give us a little more flexibility. So new projects will be committed via additional work orders, and charges will begin during the new resource implementation process, so approximately 3 months prior to commercial operations. And during that time, it gives us time to set up the bidding strategies with the SEND and test all the integrations with the scheduling coordinator, with the resource. So again, it's more than reasonable, the 3 months. And yes, it's not expected, but if for some reason we were unhappy with the performance, then we would not commit additional work orders for our projects. It is also reasonable to expect that this tool will pay for itself. I do not like making promises like that. However, in this case, we have a very volatile market, and these batteries are one of our main tools to manage that volatility. And so, again, I'm not going to promise when, but it's, reasonable to think somewhere between 1 to 3, 4 months annually is just a ballpark. And cost associated with this agreement is part of our energy costs, is part of our operating budget that has been approved by the board. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anyone? Any public comment?
None, Madam Chair.
Okay, I think we do need a motion on this
Move
item.
to adopt, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Mari, please call the roll.
Director Elo Rivera,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Aye.
Director Insunza,
Yes.
Director San Antonio,
Aye.
Director Suzuki,
Aye.
Vice Chair Yamani,
Aye.
Chair Lassen Reamer.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we now move on to item 17, update on Smart Home Flex project. Nelson Lomeli, Senior Program Manager, will present this item.
Nelson.
Yes. Hello. Good
Melly.
evening, board members. You have me again. Happy to be back. For the record, my name is Nelson Lomeli. I'm a senior program manager with the organization, and I'm joined by Tim. You want to introduce yourself real quick? And we're here just to give you a quick update on our Smart Home Flex pilot project that we've been working on over the last couple of years. So first, I want to kind of set the stage as to like why we're talking about this and why we're focusing on Smart Home Flex. So load flexibility in general, which is the ability to control when electricity is being used at the resident or at the building level, is a critical element of California's clean energy goals, as it allows us to use increased renewable energy and help support grid reliability during extreme climate-induced events. Not only does all of this help, but it also can help us lower costs for everyone, as it reduces our resource adequacy obligations, which translate to lower costs for the organization. Back about a year, 2 years ago now, going in next month, Tim presented a strategy to the board on our flex load strategy, which is focused really on increasing affordability, supporting the development of programs that reduce high costs on peak energy, which is what Smart Home Flex is all about. The strategy really focused on, again, reducing resource adequacy and energy procurement costs as a way to lower costs for everyone and control assets through this program that we now call Smart Home Flex. So I want to kind of focus a little bit on what the board had adopted in terms of a virtual power plant goal by 2035, which the board adopted back in April of this year. I believe April, it might have been May. So First of all, the board adopted generally a 1 gigawatt of local renewable and clean energy capacity. From there, we have subset goals below that, which is 150 megawatts of local capacity and infill capacity as a goal. We label this as non-VPP or non-virtual power plant, just as a way to differentiate between what we're going to be focused on. An additional 100 megawatts is focused on local battery storage, which is being accomplished partially through our solar battery savings program. And what I'm focused on and what we'll be presenting on and what Smart Home Flex is part of is the 50 megawatt VPP goal, or what we call VPP, or virtual power plant resources. I'll try to avoid using acronyms as much as possible. So as I mentioned, Smart Home Flex fits into this virtual power plant resource goal of 50 megawatts. You'll see that below that, there's a number of different technologies and strategies that we can adopt. For this particular pilot, we really focus on smart thermostats and heat pump water heaters. And eventually, we're also going to be folding in EV charging, which is another project that one of my colleagues is working on. Staff is evaluating other technologies and strategies like pool pumps, behavioral programs to get people to encourage them to use energy or shift their energy usage, and looking into how can we work with commercial buildings to shift their energy around as well. But these are just illustrative for now. I just wanted to kind of show you the kinds of strategies that we are working on and evaluating. But for the purposes of this pilot project, we really just focus on smart thermostats and heat pump water heaters. So here's a quick timeline of where we've been, where we were at. So as I mentioned, about 2 years ago, the Flex Load strategy was presented to the board and adopted. And since then, we've been working on Smart Home Flex. And where we are at now is at the evaluation piece. So we, over the summer, we tested Smart Home Flex. We called a number of Smart Flex events, which is really how we targeted residents to shift their energy usage during the summer. With the summer season now wrapped up, officially, we are now going to be doing an impact evaluation so that we know where to change things, how to change things, if anything needs to be changed at all, so that we can scale Smart Home Flex into a full program offering by next year. So some of the goals that we had set out for Smart Home Flex is, again, supporting that development of our 150 megawatt virtual power plant. Those two slides you saw at about 100 megawatts and 50 megawatts. It was really to test out the capability of the platform that we've chosen, the Distributed Energy Resource Management System platform, or the DERMS, and was really to gather as much data and lessons learned so that we know how to can better design a program that can be offered to many, many, many more residents and businesses in our service territory. And we really wanted to validate that value stream through this impact evaluation to make sure that we're reducing those RA obligations as much as possible. So just a quick summary of what we designed for this pilot. For smart thermostats, it was about reducing energy use during smart flex. So these are high peak periods, so the 4 to 9 p.m. during the summer when we're expecting incredibly high energy usage. And we worked with our power services team helping us determine when to call these events. For the thermostats, we provided a $50 per device enrollment incentive to encourage people to enroll their device, and are now providing a $25 per device participation incentives for allowing us to control their smart thermostat. For the initial pilot, we limited it to 2,000 thermostats because we wanted to just test out this capability. And we worked with our DERMS provider to target existing Google Nest and Ecobee thermostats. On the heat pump water heater side, things are slightly different in the sense that we're not just targeting shifting energy use during certain periods of time or like on an event basis, but actually shifting the energy use daily. So we wanted to make sure that we can heat water in the tank during off-peak times. And so we're doing that on a daily basis right now. For that particular side of the Smart Home Flex pilot, we again provided a $50 enrollment incentive and are providing a $5 per month participation incentive that to minimize administrative burden, we're doing on a twice per year payment basis to residents. The $5 per month aligns with what other programs throughout the state, especially ones that are working with Tech Clean California, are providing as well. We're targeting at about 100 heat pump water heaters, and those, for the moment, again, for the pilot basis, we're limiting to new installs that are coming through the statewide initiative, which you may have heard called just Tech. It's the Tech Clean California initiative, which is targeting heat pump installations.
Mm-hmm.
So wanted just to show you a little bit of the results from this initial pilot over the summer for smart thermostats. So we had initially set out a goal of 2,000 and limited to 2,000. We got really close. We got to 1,900 thermostats. We didn't quite reach the 2,000 because we had some people that either enrolled in the program and then moved or enrolled in the program and their thermostat was actually one of the initial generations. And so it dropped off. They may have installed something differently. So, but still really, really good results that we got close to that 2,000 goal. We called 6 events in the summer. So we determined the summer events to be from June through October. And I know 6 doesn't seem like a lot, but it was actually a really mild summer in general. We talked with other community choice aggregation programs throughout the state who run similar programs, and they pretty much told us the same thing. They were not seeing a ton of demand. They also had a very mild summer. Some of them were even calling events just for the purposes of calling an event to keep the customer engaged. And so we wanted to, again, test this out. We had a good participation rate, though, for those 6 events that we did call. If you look on the left-hand side, that graph, you can kind of see like what happened when we did call an event. So you see just steadily usage, and then we call an event, which is that dark blue side, and then we see that dramatic drop in energy usage. We're now doing an evaluation, as I mentioned, and we'll be able to validate the results and see how much savings we have and how many megawatts we have under control. But based on what we've seen from other studies and other programs that are similar to Smart Home Flex, we estimate that we have just a little bit under 1 megawatt under control just with this initial pilot in just thermostats. So it's a good start for this 50 megawatt goal and that we're working towards in the next year. And then for water heaters, one of the really powerful things I think for the program is that we became what's the default water heater rewards program for the Tech program. So every water heater that's installed and incentivized by the statewide initiative in the San Diego region, in particular service territory, has to enroll in a water heater rewards program, and that's our program. So I'm super excited about that. We're seeing the applications trickle in as water heater installations happen. The Tech program changed the program rules slightly where it's taking longer now for applications to be approved and then water heaters to be installed and then all of that to happen. So that's why we're seeing it just right now a small amount. We have 3 Rheem Wi-Fi connected water heaters that we're actually controlling and setting on this schedule. Actually, this is out of date. I just approved another application for a Rheem water heater, so that's 4. And so we're really excited to be gathering this data so that we know what works best as the schedule and can learn as many lessons learned for this. An exciting part that I'm really excited about is that we're going to be expanding enrollment of water heaters to more manufacturers with the use of universal control modules. So these are little devices that plug into the water heater. They connect to the internet and then we can control them as they're enrolled. And so we're going to start sending now and shipping these out to our Again, the customers that enroll through the tech program in the next couple of weeks, and especially into the new year. And we're really excited about what we can do with water heaters, especially as we look to our program portfolio and the number of programs that are going to be offered in the next year from both SDREN or San Diego Regional Energy Network, as well as through the Equitable Building DCAR program that are going to be installing a lot of new water heaters or heat pump water heaters. So in terms of next steps, one of the things that we're working on right now is sending out participation incentives. So residents are going to be, or participants of this program are going to be receiving a $25 check in the mail. We've sent out a notification and people have been responding really positively to that. We are in process of contracting with an evaluator to evaluate the pilot and give us those numbers that we desperately need. And then based on that evaluation, we're going to look to program design to maybe modify the pilot so that we can scale this into a full program offering and so that we can come back to you at the board with a budget request as a fiscal year budget next May, next June, as the budget process unfolds. And if you all agree with that and approve that budget, we can relaunch Smart Home Flex in mid-2026 once we get into our new budget season. And in parallel with all of that, we're also going to be assessing additional technologies and strategies that we can implement for a virtual power plant to achieve that 50 megawatt goal. So all in all, we're really excited about this. I think this is a really exciting pilot. We've been presenting at this throughout the state with some of the CCAs, and a lot of them are excited about what we're doing, in particular with water heaters, and I'm excited about it. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and we can go to dinner. I'm kidding.
Any comments or questions? Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. This is good stuff. And I think it's definitely the start of something that's going to hopefully build in the future. But, you know, like many incentivized programs, they don't hit the market where it's really needed. You know, I look at electric vehicles and stuff like that. I know most people in my community will never buy an electric vehicle, never get the incentives that exist. Nothing that will ever pound to anything. And so if the program only looks at new builds, it looks at smart devices to connect their stuff, I'm not sure that they're going to ever amount to the population that I have. I mean, I imagine my colleagues probably share some of the same, you know, community things where we have people who aren't necessarily impoverished, but they struggle to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. And so as the program goes along, perhaps looking at ways to get that demographic rolled into this, because again, you know, people who have new installations of water heaters, you know, in my community, I don't imagine more than probably 10% of the homes have a thermostat because we live by the beach, and that's a blessing in its own. But you know, I just think there's some great opportunity, and I love the idea of when you call for these alerts. I would love to see that so that somebody has an app in their hand, because most people do have smartphones, that they can say, wow, there is a thing. Let's make sure we're not turning the dryer on until after this. So those types of things. So I think as you look and expand the horizons, I think the component-based programs are helpful, but I think something that really reaches out to the people in the general population, who if you get an alert, say, hey, it's going to be really expensive if you are running all your lights or your washer, your dryer, you know, or even your thermostat, teach them how to turn your thermostat down. I think the impact and the savings will really be felt much, much greater. So that's just my recommendation. But, you know, again, great presentation, and I love to hear the beginnings and seeing it moving forward, and the participation was good on this past year.
Chair, if I can comment. Yes, absolutely. I appreciate your comments on that. And that is part of what we're evaluating as well, and why we're evaluating the behavior base, the behavioral side, which is as opposed to making someone download yet another app, because there's an app for everything, is what if we just use text messages to do that? And so there's a component around text messages or emails that we can communicate to residents in that way, especially when these events are called. But yes, there's a number of other strategies that we're looking at of like how do we target some of the lower income or people who aren't widget based, if you will, if you would call it. So yes, definitely appreciate the comment and we'll take it to heart.
I have a couple of questions. So thank you for the presentation. It actually gets me very excited because my dream is to have a smart home, just everything smart. I know I want the robots. So I will plug into the matrix. No one will stop me.
You can be our board model for the program.
That will be. So I was gonna, because I kind of am following what Director Fisher is talking about, that Ream Wi-Fi connected water heater. How much do those run?
The Ream water heater, it's not a huge premium over a standard heat pump water heater. I think the exciting thing about the water heater technology is that every home has one, regardless of where you are and what climate zone you're in. And the state's decarbonization goals and push towards heat pump technology means that we expect to see a wholesale switch over to that technology. Also, the California, the J13 energy code change that occurred requires trying not to be too technical. It requires a communication standard equivalent to what the Ream technology is. That was kind of a first mover in the market. So the state's now requiring that all new heat pump water heaters have that technology or an equivalent standard. And Nelson mentioned that universal control module, which is an external port that we plug into the water heaters. So what we're doing now is really kind of baseline, like yeoman's work to understand how all the technology comes together so that as we start to see that change in the marketplace, both from a code compliance perspective, but also from some of the programs that Nelson mentioned. So we have the Equitable Building Decarb, which we've presented to you before, which is a underserved community direct install program. And we have the Regional Energy Network, which will have incentives for underserved communities for things like water heaters. We're trying to prepare the technical underpinnings so that when those assets start to go in on a direct install basis or incentivized basis, or for the laggards just from code compliance, we're going to have the infrastructure and architecture in place to bring those into the VPP. These are pretty efficient technologies. And so the relative flex load value of each one is small, but there's over 400,000 single family homes in the service territory. And that's a huge load when you start to add it all up together.
So how much do they cost?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh. I was like waiting. I feel like I'm being sold something, but I'm
funny. I do not have a cost for you. I can tell you what they cost. I live in Oregon. I can tell you what the cost is in Oregon.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take yours. What do they cost in Oregon? I'm curious.
Installed, I've seen them around $3,200 depending.
Okay. Because I remember when our water heater broke and then I found out that they expire. I mean, that's something that not a lot of people know until you own a home and you're like, I just bought this home and it expires. So, but now you're saying that we're going to have to, I mean, there's code now that's requiring us to go to this technology. So that's not bad. And if there are incentives for underserved communities, that would be good for us to get out because eventually then you'll have way more than your four. You'll have a lot more. And I think that maybe I'm excited about this. This sounds really good. And a lot of us, that have our homes for 10, 15 years, and then we're going to have to move to that. So, I mean, it sounds like we don't really have a choice. And so it is good to get on this and incentivize it and maybe more than $50, but like something else that we could figure out. I don't know what I feel like we had some kind of program or that Community Power was doing something where you were providing or helping people connect with devices. Am I wrong? Was there something out there that you folks were helping people if they applied for it?
Yeah, so I think what you might have been referencing is we had a marketplace, I think, at one point, that was helping to connect, but it was to solar systems. But the other thing about, I think, the connection piece is the San Diego Regional Energy Network. Part of their program portfolio includes single family and multifamily, and it's about connecting them to some of these, we call them electrification technology, but really they're energy efficiency technology, because they're just super, super, super efficient at moving heat between the tank and the outside, or outside to the tank. And so that's how the energy network, or the REN, is going to be working to incentivize these.
I appreciate the enthusiasm. I feel like we need to make you need to make the promotional video for the program. It's great. Any other enthusiastic questions or comments?
Well, no guarantees on the enthusiasm, but I do have some questions. First, apologies for being late to everyone here. How would you, and I asked this question on all sorts of different items, but how would you explain to just the average person what the benefit for them is for them to participate and for the program to exist as a whole?
Yeah, I think where most people tend to go when they try to explain the benefits is really like, oh, the incentive, like you can get $50, whatever. But really, for me, the benefit of the program and as a whole, and why someone should participate, is that we're helping to control their energy costs, because what we're doing is helping to avoid, in particular for like water heaters, water being heated during the most expensive time of the day, when we can shift that water heating to occur during off-peak times. I'm being a little technical, but during the off-peak times when renewable energy is abundant. So not only is that water being heated renewably, but also at a much lower cost. We can send a signal to the water heater, say, don't heat water during this period of time, and be able to heat that water up to a higher temperature, so that the resident never knows that their water heater is even being controlled, right? Because they're just going to turn the tap on and it's going to be 120-degree water flowing to their tap. For thermostats, I would say similarly, right? We're helping to control their costs by either pre-cooling ahead of time when rates are lower, and then avoiding the AC unit to turn on during that time, or if it does need to turn on, it's for a much shorter amount of time, so that they're not running at full scale during the most expensive time of the day. So for me, that's where the benefits of like this program come in, is really about helping on a direct level to the resident, but then on a wholesale level, larger level for us, is we can reduce the cost for the organization, which then translates to more stable rates as a whole for residents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. A couple things. And I don't mean to sound nitpicky here, but I think that thinking about that part is really important in how we label these programs. I don't know that the average person would know what a smart home flex pilot project is. And that matters for a few reasons. One, the less explaining we have to do to have someone opt in, the better, the easier it is to get folks to participate. And I saw the participation rate, I think it was like 1,943 out of 2,000. It's fantastic. But like, why not make our jobs easier whenever possible? And then having an easy to explain name of the program helps people talk about the program to one another, and it helps folks understand what we're doing. So we've created a program to save people money. That is good. And like, we'll have like a extremely high approval rating. And I think about that at like the program specific level, but also in the portfolio of things that Community Power is doing. And if they look at what we're doing and see this cost saving program and that cost saving program and this one, and like those are like really good things for us to be known for. And so I just want to encourage us to think about that as we're creating the programs. We do the same. I want to just acknowledge this is not a Community Power specific problem. I think this is a problem within government that I've been a part of at times. Just to not go too far down a rabbit hole, but at the city, we created a program to prevent homelessness for seniors, people with disabilities, and families with young children. It was really good. And we called it the Housing Instability Prevention Program, which means nothing to anyone. And like for 3 years now, I'm like, can we rename the program so that people understand like what we're doing? And so I just want to encourage us to think about that on the front end of like, hey, what are we trying to do for everyday people? And can we like make sure that this is labeled in the way that makes it the easiest to understand for the folks who we want to participate in it and for the general public? So anyways, that's like not into the technical weeds at all, but I just really want it to be easier for everyday people to understand the story of what community powers work amounts to for folks. And the last thing I just want to kind of co-sign on the point made by Member Fisher that to the extent possible, we can be really intentional about ensuring that the folks who can benefit the most from something like this are able to participate in it. And that's the whole reason for having a portfolio of programs, is to be able to help folks at up and down the income scale and maximize our impact. But I just want to acknowledge what was said there and think that's really important as well. So I don't know if you have any response to that. Happy to hear it. I just thought that was important to.
I think it's important. Totally understood your feedback on the name, and I'm already thinking about like if we come back to you in May with I don't know, some random name in the budget item, and you're like, what is this? We'll make sure to explain.
Yeah, and I mean, this is exactly when it comes up, is during the budget conversations typically, right? And maybe it's the program formerly known as the Smart Home Flex Pilot Project in parentheses for the time being. And then like my guess is like there's a lot for us to remember as well, but this is like such a good example of, did you know that there's there's a program at Community Power where we are like providing folks with thermostats to save money? That's great. And then you get a check at the end, like, wow.
The free thermostats, cheaper energy program.
Yeah, like what, like totally. And again, then you get a check, like at the yeah. So I just want to really encourage us to tell our story in the most easy to understand ways possible, because the actual work is oftentimes super technical, but like the outcome for folks is actually very easy to understand. It's like cheaper, cleaner energy. And I just want us to be as like militant as possible in making sure that message is delivered to people so that we can grow and do it even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get right on it. It's great feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is like a little, I think one of our, we have a lot of little gems, I think, at San Diego Community Power. Overall, this is an amazing organization that just does quality work across the board in terms of, excellent financial management and, lower rates for customers and really trying to build out our clean energy portfolio. I think big picture strategy is really, really compelling and something I'm really proud of. But also, I'm just so proud of all our little gems. I think we have all these little programs that are pilot programs that do really amazing things for our community. And we're proving that they work, and then we can scale them. And we're like planting seeds that in like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years are going to, I think, really yield massive, massive benefits for our community. And I think we all sit on boards, lots of boards that aren't necessarily planting seeds in this kind of sort of long-term way. So it's just great. So thank you, Karen. Okay, this I think also is just a receive and file. So thanks so much. And we now go into the CEO report.
Madam Chair, before you go, we don't have any public comment on this item.
Sorry. Thank you so much.
All right, so I am truly the last speaker before dinner. Next slide, please. All right, so good evening, Chair, members of the board, and our team out there. As we close out this year, I want to take a moment to reflect on San Diego, what we have accomplished together in service of our mission, delivering clean, affordable energy to nearly 1 million customers across our region. We've reaffirmed our commitment to building a local power supply by contracting for 11 new distributed energy resource projects. At the same time, we've strengthened our risk management and compliance capabilities by bringing key functions in-house and building strong data analytics. And this year marked our second successful prepay bond, which will enable our customers to save more than $12 million annually, with $6.5 million in savings in 2025 alone. Financially, we will achieve our reserve target of 180 days cash on hand and generate millions of additional income through smart investments. And local development doesn't just mean renewable energy projects. You've seen our little gems and our growing programs. And our local development efforts are supported by those programs, the rebates and incentives that we offer to our customers. In October, our programs team converted the nationally recognized solar battery savings pilot into a fully fledged program, alongside our other flexible load pilots and grant-funded initiatives that will work together to reduce peak load and expand customer benefits. Led by an in-house team at Community Power, in partnership with the County of San Diego and program implementers, we have been building the San Diego Regional Energy Network all year and are excited to launch it publicly in the first quarter of 2026. The SD-REN will offer 10 energy efficiency programs that shape how people access clean energy solutions that will help everyone save money and will ensure these benefits reach every corner of our region. Our legislative and regulatory team secured important wins, protecting funding for energy efficiency programs, ensuring fair treatment in statewide programs, and advancing legislation such as the Pathways Initiative that will improve grid reliability and affordability for all customers in California. Internally, we invested heavily in IT and data analytics, rolling out our enterprise data platform, our Sequant platform, strengthening our cybersecurity, and completing a successful CPUC audit. Our public affairs team continued to expand our reach through partnerships and participation at over 200 community events. Last month, we launched our new website with a brand refresh that significantly improves customer experience and transparency. Human Resources continues to lead a workforce transformation that supports growth, equity, and professional development, maintaining one of the highest retention rates in the industry at over 96%. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the many accomplishments that point back to our mission, our clean, affordable, reliable energy for the communities that we serve. None of this would be possible without the leadership of our board, the collaboration of our member agencies, our community advisory committee, the support of our partners, and above all, the dedication of our incredible team. Thank you for your commitment and for making San Diego Community Power one of the most innovative and impactful community choice energy providers in the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me just take a moment before we adjourn to find out if any of my colleagues, any of the members of the board of directors have any reports or updates.
Really quick, I just wanted to thank Karen for her leadership throughout the year that since I've been here, I've seen you give presentations, you've represented Community Power well, and thank you for that, because I know it's not easy teaching people about new technologies and everything. But also, just a real quick announcement, La Mesa is hosting our Holiday in the Village tomorrow on Saturday. So if anybody's in East County, come by.
Thank you. I just have a quick announcement. The county just adopted a policy to look for locations primarily for the DAC-GT program. So our staff should be reaching out to Community Power, but people got real ambitious and they amended my motion, and then they wanted to look for lots of solar sites throughout, especially our unincorporated county. So there might also be a list of sort of smaller sites that could be good for rooftop solar and multifamily buildings coming your way. It was very ambitious. Everyone's wanted solar in their neighborhood. So
Thank you. Through the chair, just wanted to thank everyone, thank our CEO, thank the board here the staff, thank you all. Tira for making sure that we are on track. And Mari, thank you for taking care of us, and Sandra. Thank you so much. Happy holidays. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there anything else for anyone else? Thank you to the whole team. Thank you to all of you, and happy holidays. Thank you. Okay, our next regular meeting of the Community Power Board of Directors will be on January 15th, 2026 at 5 o'clock. We are adjourned.